anybody that saw the previous couple of videos, they'll know that this week I've been working on All Round 360 Limited website, which is a virtual tours, 360 virtual tours site that is for us, me here. And the various things I wanted to do was just touch up on things like the header banner, just to put some effects onto the banner, which I'm now happy with that's running as I want to. The camera kind of clicks like a shutter if you watch, there you go, and the 360 revolves and the drone hovers. Yeah, fine, good. That was done. I also wanted to put a banner in the middle there, and I've done a fairly quick banner. This is the raw pictures as they come out of the camera, so it starts with the photography, goes through to create the panorama, and that panorama then becomes the 360 image. If I just click on that, and so those two previous pictures basically end up looking like that. That is what we were aiming to do, so that's what we've got. Go full screen, escape, click, and then I had some areas at the bottom of the site, had some just junk text in there ready to fill in, and I've just formatted that and made that good. So just basically it's a one-page website. It's got a live chat function that I've put on there, so that when people actually type anything in, that will come through to me and my colleagues, and we can answer any questions. That's quite good. I've got a contact details and form there copied over on the left hand sliding banner, and then the menu system was the only other thing. I just wanted it to be as simple as possible. It's a one-page site, no point in making it too complicated, and so it will just slide down to various sections as the menu dictates, drain use and so on. So earlier in the week we had a couple of inquiries that came in, and we've actually converted both of those, and we were recommended by somebody that we'd already done a couple of buildings for them, and so that's good. And then last night we had a gentle inquiry on this website. It was amazing, and so that hasn't converted yet, but we've got to get back to the guy on Monday, so that could be in the space of this week. That's potentially 3 jobs, but most certainly we've got 2 new jobs coming in up in London again, of course, and there you go. So anyway, that wasn't why you called, so let's get rid of that and bring up Lightroom, because the purpose of what I want to show you today, yesterday in conversation with the chap that inquired, he said, well, what is the workflow? What is involved when you go out and you do these 360 virtual tours? And I kind of explained to him, well, we go out with a fully fledged DSLR camera and lens, but we also use a dedicated 360 camera, and I've got it here. And if I can just get this screen to come on. I know I've shown this in a previous video, but this is basically the dedicated camera, and with its lenses on both sides, and this is the Ricoh Theta Z1. And I think Ricoh bought out Pentax. It's all part of Pentax. Well, Pentax is now part of Ricoh, and but that's an extremely good dedicated 360 camera, and so that's what we use. And I explained to him that the workflow using that is far reduced from what it would be if we were using the DSLR all the time, and but I won't go into that now. So what I really want to do is just show you basically what the workflow is. So when you open up Lightroom, you have a collection of photographs that hopefully, let's just go into there we go. So you have the option to create catalogues, and when you go out with your camera to a client, you may take 100, 200, 500 pictures or so on. Well, when you come back into the office, you then download those images onto the computer, and we want to get them then into Lightroom as a catalogue. So they go into Lightroom as a catalogue of images, and this is the catalogue I created for a first set of images that we did at a boutique hotel. So from here, I just wanted to pick on one picture in particular which I sourced earlier, that one. Let's just double click that one. And the reason being is that this first set of images weren't particularly good. They were badly exposed in the first instance, and the hotel bedroom especially was quite dark. It was an old building with very low, small windows, so there was no real natural light coming into the room, which means that you're going to get a lot of noise, like speckles, on the picture. And we didn't set the camera up properly. So what I'm talking about here is, when you think of taking a picture, you're thinking about going, click, there's my picture. Okay, well, with modern day cameras, with the DSLRs that we use and the Ricoh, we have the option to use what's called bracketing. And what that is that instead of taking one picture, it will take 3 images or 5 or 7 or 9 images at different exposures. So in the instance of the Ricoh, what we do, we set it on its tripod in a room, and then we set 5, I always like to do 5 different exposure settings on that camera for the same room. And there's good reason for that, because if you're standing in a room and it's got one window, you can see in this picture here, the window over here is completely bleached out. You can't see any detail. There's actually some net curtaining in that window, but because it's overexposed, the whole image is overexposed, that window especially just looks completely bleached and ruined. And that's no good. I mean, you wouldn't want to look at that picture and scroll around that room and walk into the light type thing in one corner. That's just not good. It also had wall lights on, which kind of was a necessity, but a pain in the backside as well when it comes to editing, because of course that's another light source where the rest of the room is in the dark. So if you were to take one picture on one exposure setting, you're going to end up with underexposed and overexposed areas of that room. When you take bracketed pictures, you only click the shutter the once, as you would do, but it will automatically take 5 or 7 or 9, however many you choose, but I choose 5 different pictures on those different exposures that you determine, that you set on that camera before you press the shutter. So what you would do, if I go, so here, that's the same image, and I think that one there would be no, that's another room. So this here is a very underexposed image of that room. Still underexposed, but not so bad. Roundabout medium, roundabout normal, and it probably was about that. It wasn't a dingy room. It was a fantastic room. There was no natural light coming in, and then of course you've got the overexposed image there. Now, where we went wrong is that image, and that image. The first 3 were all underexposed, terribly underexposed, and this one, which was moderately underexposed. And what you're supposed to do with bracketing is have one image which would be like this, that will show the detail on things like the wall lights, and clearly you can see there the window. You can see there's a vague bit of greenery going on, and looks like there's a road out there somewhere, and so on. And then you can see on the very bleached version where that's completely lost with the overexposure. But when you set up those exposures separately on the camera, and then you merge those 5 images from the overexposed one that will pick up details on the cupboard door over here nicely, to the underexposed one which will pick up the window over here, you have what's called an HDR image, which is a high dynamic range, enabling you in Lightroom, for example, to edit and control parts of that image as you want them. So what we're going to do first of all, and I've probably done this previously, so I'm going to get rid of the old HDR image. I don't need it. What's that? It's a DNG. So the raw images that come off the camera are DNG images. That's a DNG, that's an HD, yeah, I don't want that one. Let's get rid of that for the time being, it just gets confusing otherwise. So that's the other room. Okay, so we're left with the 5 pictures that we took when we went there. So there's that one, that one, and one, and that one. And I'm going to gather all of those up, so select all 5, and then I'm going to photo merge and make an HDR, a high dynamic range picture. and merge those images. So up here in the top left hand corner, that's actually now merging those images. And what will happen somewhere along the bottom here, hopefully, you'll end up with your HDR. So I can see if I highlight on those over here, that's telling me that they're still DNGs, and if I highlight that one, that's telling me I'm on an HDR. So I think that is going to be the resultant image. And yeah, I mean, it's not bad. Now what we need to do now is we need to adjust all the lighting, and because this is still in its fisheye mode and it hasn't been merged into a panorama, what I don't want to do is handle these windows in two separate sections. So what I'm going to do is immediately merge them down into the panorama and make the funny looking but obvious looking panorama image. So I'm going to right click, and this is where we use the software that comes with the Ricoh Theta Z1. So I'm going to edit in Ricoh Theta, and it's worth just pointing out the bit depth when you edit in the camera software, it's 8 bits, not 16, and that's relevant later on. So this is editing with the camera software, and the bit depth will be 8 bits, not 16. So let's just go ahead and do that. And that will probably open up a window on my other monitor, hopefully. Let's bring that across. So that's what it's going to look like, and I'm just going to OK that, and you can now see that we've got the panorama picture, and the window is no longer in two sections, it's in the one part there. It's going to move over to develop. That was my library pictures, this is develop, so I can now get the panel up on the right hand side, which is all my settings. And what you can see here is you can just about make out the net curtains. You can't make out much of what's going on beyond those net curtains. I could play around with that a little bit. I think I might just reduce the exposure down slightly, but I'm really not going to do much. And the more I put the lightness up, I'm going to leave it like that. But you can see there's net curtains, you can see the framework of the window vaguely behind. Can't see too much else behind it, but I know that this room, because it's so dark, is not going to look fantastic in a picture anyway, and it simply would be a retake as far as I was concerned. But you notice there, so highlights are on 4. If I zoom the highlights up, the whole of the image changes along with me, and that's no good, because obviously what's good for the window isn't necessarily good for the rest of the image. So there has to be a way in which I can edit the rest of the room and make the rest of the room lighter whilst saving what I've done with that window in that area, and there's masking. So up here in the top right hand corner of Lightroom, in fact let me just move the screen over, I'm not sure if you're getting all that in the window. Let's just go over here. There we go. So up here we've got a brush tool, and we can use this brush tool and mask our area. Now what this does, this means by doing this, and you can see the area which I've masked has gone dark. I'll show you something else in a moment to make it a bit more obvious. But if I mask the rest of the area, so I've got control over this area, and then I adjust the settings, it will mean that I will be adjusting the settings in the masked area without affecting what's going on in this window area, which is about as good as it's ever going to get, which isn't good, but it's about as good as it's going to get. Now this is actually quite difficult to see, so there is a little tip, a little box down here that says show selected mask overlay. If you click on that, it comes up in this nice bright red colour, and I can now zoom over and mask my image quite nice and quickly. Just to let you see, I can adjust the size of my brush, and the inner circle of this brush is where the actual brush is the brush size. I can reduce that to next to nothing or bigger again. The outer circle is the amount of feathering. So if I didn't have any feathering, then I would have a very sharp line to all of this around here, which doesn't blend nicely with the bit that you're going to leave. So I always leave a reasonable amount of feather on there, and that works quite well. So there we go. I'm just going to rush through this, to be honest. I'm not going to worry too much about it. I'll do a rough feather around there, and come along through there and do that blind. Okay, and I pretty much largely left the window alone, and so let's just click this back off again, and now I can use these controls and keep your eye on the window, because if I now put the exposure up, everything else will move apart from the window. And I'm not going to play around with exposure. Exposure is really something that, if it had been correctly set on the camera at the time, I wouldn't be touching exposure. That is something that is really, for me, a no-no. The only thing I would normally do is play around with the white balance, which is temperature. So temperature of the image, I can go to one way and make it hotter, and it will normally come out yellow. Colder, it will come out blue. And somewhere in there is a happy medium that will give me as realistic a look of that room as I can get. So I'll leave it pretty much around about there. It's still very dark. I'm reluctant to go too light with exposure or highlights, because that will just burst out and bleach out these wall lights. So instead of that, I'm going to use shadows and see if I can just lighten up some of the floor. And yeah, now that actually was probably about as light as that room was. It was not particularly light. Okay, so there are other things there that I could play with, but genuinely, for the purposes of right now, that's about right. The window might be a little bit blue-white. This might be a bit yellow-light. I might just tint that down just a fraction. Try and give it some parity. But really, I'm reluctant to go too far with that. As I say, it would be a retake rather than I wouldn't use one of these. But now that I've done that, I can close that editing, and that's my image. I can see some detail on that net curtaining. It doesn't look like a bleached white light, so I'm happy with that. And the next thing I need to do is get rid of this nadir mark. Now, what this black mark is here is the top of the tripod that the camera was sat on. Bearing in mind it's a 360 camera, so it basically takes a picture of its own base and of the tripod. So I normally always go out with as small and as narrow a tripod as I can, so to avoid having massive splayed out legs at the bottom and having to do a lot more. So to get rid of that, I now need to edit this in Photoshop. So straight from Lightroom, straight over into Photoshop, which has been playing up since their latest update. So I've just been updating Photoshop as well. It's been crashing for some unknown reason, which is really annoying when you're in the middle of doing something. There we go. Hopefully it should, with luck. There we go. Right, now then, do you remember when we did the editing and we made the panorama in the Ricoh Theta software itself, and we merged it down into the panorama, and I said, watch that, it will be 8-bit, not 16-bit. Well, when you put a picture into Photoshop, the standard settings for Photoshop really are 16-bit, and you can see on the right hand side here that this is opened up into a 16-bit channel. So I don't want that. I need to put that back to 8-bit, and there is good reason, so that when I make a 3D render of this, which I'll do in a moment, if I had it on 16-bit, it wouldn't match, and it would distort the colours, it would distort the resolution range, and the whole image would just look absolutely degraded beyond and dark. So have that on parity with what you've edited it out in Stitcher, and Stitcher only gives you the option to edit it out in 8-bit. So that's 8-bit. From here in Photoshop, and I want to get rid of this nadir, so I could do it just like this. I could copy this over, but I always like to see exactly where I am with a nadir. So I go into 3D view and spherical panorama, new panorama layer, and this will give me a moving image. So this is actually our 3D image coming to us courtesy of Photoshop. And if I scroll down to the floor, that is the tripod. That's the bottom of the camera itself and the tripod. So any of the lasso tools, there's numerous things that you can use to get rid of this very quickly. Because we've got a wooden floor here, should be quite easy to do. So just lasso really quite quick, and I go to edit and fill. Make sure that we're on content aware, and what content aware is doing, the software is looking at the surrounding area to the bit that I want to take out, and it's going to fill this area with what it perceives should be there based on what is around it. And so if I'm really lucky, I won't have any more work to do. There you go. So sometimes if you've got a tiled floor, it will get the lines of the tiles wrong, and you can just paint them back in with Photoshop. But because this is a wooden floor, to be honest, you're not gonna see any difference there. Let's just go back up to that tool and bring this back up. So that's our image. That is about, I don't want to use the word dingy. It wasn't dingy, it was gorgeous, but it was very low light. I mean, these lights are on automatically for a purpose, that it was really dark without them. It just made photography really difficult, and it's a really low grade image. I can see pixelating going on here, but anyway, that's not a worry for the time being. Okay, so really all that's left to do is to save this out as a panorama. So I don't want to save it out as a 3D. I want to save it as a ready-made 3D. I want to save this out as a panorama. So I go back up to 3D, and I go spherical panorama, and instead of new panorama layer, I go export panorama. When it's ready, this is another Photoshop bomb out. I do apologise, but it's been doing this all morning this morning. Thank you. Very pleased. Okay, right, so I'm going to call this Pano 221. I'm just going to save it for argument's sake on my desktop and go. Okay, I can now close this down. Don't want to save that. In fact, I'll get rid of Photoshop altogether and kill Lightroom. And now we go to the 3D software. So I'm using 3DVista. Now, there are dozens of virtual tour software manufacturers. Some of them are very basic, and let's just do that one. I'm just loading up my software on the other screen, so I'll just wait for that to happen. I can't move the screen over until it's happened. But yeah, some of the 3D virtual tour softwares are quite basic. Some of them are overly technical, and you know, I hate to say it, but they're like geek software, where they literally they literally spend days doing all the code themselves, and really, you've got time to do that? Okay. And it doesn't necessarily make for better results. And then there is a group of software companies, that, including 3DVista, that really come out quite high in the league for control and what you can do, flexibility. So I've opened up this one. This is an existing 3D tour, which is fine. And for argument's sake, all I'm going to do is just add another picture. And I just want to import a panorama. I don't want to create a panorama that I would have to do with a DSLR camera. So I'm just going to import this and as a standard panorama. Find it, hopefully it should be down here. Pano 221, open. There should be another little button, apply to all panoramas, and no, I won't bother ticking that. And it's now appeared in here. So if I double click on this, there is my panorama. There's the floor. I challenge you to see where the tripod used to be. Yes, I agree, it is a poor quality image, but that is how it's done, and you have to repeat that by the amount of rooms that you have. So you know, if you're doing a 50 room panoramas, 50 room virtual tour, then the process I've just done and obviously spending a bit more time on it to make sure that you get it as good as you can get and try and get rid of some of the noise that's inbuilt into the image. It's a task, it's a job, but the end result is really satisfying when you see it all linked up to the other rooms and you can really walk through. And you know, I think in this one, in this hotel, this is an inner corridor, there's a bathroom in behind there, and you just put a link in there. The next image, you click on the link, it will automatically take you through to the bathroom, back out to the landing area, you know, and you can literally walk around the hotel, and it's an amazing thing. So that really is the workflow. That's all I wanted to show you. And of course the window is not perfect, but it looks far more natural than having that bleached white light. And believe me, if you were watching this and I'd have bleached that out, that would be a dazzling white light, and you wouldn't even know that it was a window. It would just look like a light panel, and you actually have still got the light shades on the wall in here. So I really don't think that's done too badly. But that's it. That's all I wanted to show you. So I'm signing off for now, and until next time.